Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted the Murknob from the Kruleboyz using mostly contrast paint to a tabletop ready standard. Here's our Murknob with Belcher banner all ready to go, and I primed him using the Citadel colour Wraithbone contrast undercoat paint, and I find this works really well for any contrast paints. And the paints we'll be using in this video will mostly be contrast paints with some metallic paints and some technical paints and a bit of dry brushing. And the brush I'll mostly be using is a Kolinsky synthetic number 2 size brush throughout the video, but I'll also use some other brushes as you'll see when we do the dry brushing stages. Okay, let's get started, and the first paint we're going to use is the Leadbelcher Base paint, and this is a nice dark silver metallic paint, and we're going to just block in every part of this model that we want to be metallic. So starting with the weapon here, just giving it one coat, and I don't water this down or wet it down at all, just use it pretty much straight from the pot, and then I just give it one coat, nice even coat all over, and then I find once we put some layers of contrast paint over this, it works really well. So if you want to, you could wet it down a little bit and do 2 coats, but I like to just go with 1 coat. I am only looking for a tabletop ready standard here, so I want each stage to be pretty quick. But even though it's tabletop ready standard, I want it nice and neat. So I do take my time, and I make sure when I block in like this that I'm well in the lines. And so if I make any mistakes, I'll always tidy them up with a little bit more base Wraithbone paint and just bring it back to this stage so we can get it nice and neat. Once that's dried, we go with a contrast snakebite leather, and this is going to go all over the base. And you see I've got a different brush here, just a big chunky cheap brush, and this is going to hold a lot more paint, and I'm just going to cover that entirely with the snakebite leather, and this is going to give us our base colour for the base of the model. Next paint is the contrast skeleton horde, and this is going to be for the little skull we can see poking out there, and I'm being quite generous with the amount of paint I'm putting on, really forcing it into the teeth and eye sockets so we get some nice shade in those recesses, and that snakebite leather's giving us our nice colour. Now I'm going to go with a Plaguebearer flesh contrast, and that's going to go over all the skin areas, and I'm not using this to give any like shadow or shade. I just want to give this a nice thin coat all over, and then we'll put a shade over this later on that will really bring out all the textures of the model. So just one nice thin coat all over all those areas, the head, the feet, the arms, anywhere the skin's exposed. And anytime you're using the contrast paints, if you want more paint to be in certain areas, then just start and end your brush strokes where you want most of the paint to build up, and then you can adjust how much you're putting on depending on how much you want it to go into those recesses, and the more you put on, the more time you're going to have to move that paint around and get it to settle where you want it. Next we go back to that snakebite leather, and this is going to be for all the bindings that we can see. So the back of the calf here, he's got some bindings wrapped around his leg, and this snakebite leather is a great colour. It really is. It's perfect for any like leather straps like this. On the front he's also got some leather straps coming down, so we're going to give those a nice coat. And when I did the straps on the calf, I had a little bit more paint on my brush than I do here, because there's more recesses, there's more texture, and there's more like surface area that paint's going to get sucked into. So it's just adjusting how much you put on your brush really, which comes with practice, and I think that you can get some great results. Next we're going to take one of my favourite colours, Volupus Pink, and this is going to be for that huge rotting tongue that's on the banner. And I'm putting a nice amount on here because I really want to get it in those recesses and then make the most of this rich colour to give us some nice dark shadows in those recesses. And one coat of this is going to make this tongue look awesome. You'll see at the end, it's one of my favourite parts from the whole model when it's finished. And literally all it is one coat of contrast paint. Now we're going to take some contrast wildwood, really nice dark brown colour, and this is going to go on all the little bits of wood we can see. And there's not much on here, so the main banner handle here is going to get a nice coat, and then also on the handle of his kind of bladed weapon there, so give that a little bit too. And just make sure you move the model so you don't have to go around all these fiddly bits, and gives you a lot more control. Now we're going to take some contrast Gorgrunta Fur, another really nice brown colour, but it's got a little bit of an orangey tone to it, which I think is perfect against the green. And so this is going to be used for all the leather material he's wearing in his cloak and his robe. We'll darken this up a little bit later on with a shade, so for now we just want to give it a nice, good, thick, even coat all over. So I'm not flooding it with paint, and you don't have to do that with contrast paints. You know, you can be quite delicate with it. I'm giving it a nice even coat though, so not too much here, but just enough where you get a real nice rich colour across the whole piece. Then I'm going to take some base Wraithbone paint, and here by mistake I painted this severed hand on the top with the metallic paint, so I just want to give that 2 coats of this Wraithbone just to bring it back to that base primed colour, and then we can go over it with our contrast paints next. And now I'm going to take a Gryph-Charger grey, which is a real pale bluey grey, and I'm using the image from the War Scroll for the Murknob here as my guide, and it's got this real bluey, poison, drained looking colour, and I think this matches it really well. And I think the idea here is that this severed head's been affected by all the odours coming off that Belcher banner, and they've really had an effect. Same on the head down here, and yeah, so this is a great colour to match it to the images we see on the War Scroll for sure. Then we're going to take some Guilliman flesh, and this is a great one for any flesh tone for like human kind of figures. And then this is going to go over that other severed head, and it's quite pale on the War Scroll image that I'm using, but this is going to be perfect because you know, we've got that Wraithbone underneath, which is really going to come through, and that Guilliman flesh is going to go into those recesses and bring out all the texture of the model. I'm also using it to go over the gold colour that I want on these little shields that he's got on his like totem, and that's going to give us almost like an old worn brassy bronzy colour. We'll go over it later with another colour as you'll see, but this is to get us started. Now I'm going with Basilicanum grey, and that's going to be for the hair, for the severed head that he's got around his belt. I thought about using black, but I thought no, I want it a bit more washed out, so I went for this nice grey colour, and then I'll do the same on the head up here, and then that's going to give us all the hair, a nice kind of washed out, poisoned, dead looking hair. Next it's Contrast Blood Angels red, and I'm going to use this to go over the metallic parts of the banner and also of his armour. Now this isn't the finished result I like. When I did this, I didn't like how it turned out. It didn't look very good. The red was too dark, as you'll see once it's drying. It just didn't work for me, so I've left it in the video just so you can see what it does look like if you want to go for a more metallic look for this part of the Belcher banner and the armour. But what I did, as you'll see later on, is I took it right back down to that Wraithbone base colour and then went back over it with just the red, so we don't get a metallic effect. Okay, now I'm going to take some Bealtan green, and this is going to go all over the orc skin and anywhere you can see any of the flesh, and everywhere we painted with that Plaguebearer flesh earlier on. This recipe of Plaguebearer flesh and then Bealtan green I got from the painting coach, and this is now my go-to orc or auroch skin, and so I'm going to use this on all my orcs now. It's just really quick to do. The effects are really great. You get some nice highlights coming through from that yellowy green Plaguebearer flesh underneath, and this nice rich Bealtan green shade really goes into the recesses to give us the shadow, bringing out all that texture from the model. So thanks to the painting coach, and I recommend you check out his channel. Next I'm going to take some Agrax Earthshade, and this is going to go all over the base. So everywhere we painted earlier on with that snakebite leather on the base, we're going to cover with this. And this is just going to give us a bit more depth to the shadows there in amongst all the vines and stones and grungy, swampy texture there. And I also put a coat over the metallic area I painted with that red. But again, we're going to just take this right back down to Wraithbone later on. But this was a nice way, if you wanted to keep it metallic and get away from the images on that we see that came with the War Scrolls, then you could do this too. Right, now I'm going to do that also on all the areas we painted with that brown leather, and then this is just going to make it a little bit darker, and it's also going to just give us some extra depth. Now it's time for some technical paint, some Nurgles Rot. This is awesome. This gives us a real slimy look, perfect for a swamp, and you can see I've got quite a lot on the brush there, and rather than painting it on, I'm just rolling my brush and almost scooping a big dollop of it in there, and then that's going to dry really glossy, really slimy, and just sell that effect of a kind of swampy base. And so really quick to do. All we've done here is literally put a snakebite leather coat on there, an Agrax Earthshade, and then a little bit of this, and we're pretty much done. That's the base almost finished, and I'm really happy with the result. I love this Nurgle Rot. It's a great paint to use. Now it's time for some Nuln Oil Shade, and then we're going to use this to go over all the areas that we've painted with that Leadbelcher earlier that are going to be silver metal, and being quite generous with this, trying to use the texture of the model to get that paint off the brush. And then so I'm moving the model around, moving myself so I can wipe that paint off on that texture, really get it into the recesses, So putting quite a lot on here. It's a lot thinner than contrast paint, so it really likes to run into those recesses, but it really brings all the texture of the model to life. It's great for stuff like all these chains and all the little bits of armour. It really gets in there and gives us a nice shade and a nice base. Then I take some Typhus Corrosion, and when that stage of Nuln Oil is completely dry, I'm going to gently stipple this on. And this is just going to give us a kind of aged metallic look and give us a really quick effect, so we don't have to paint this effect on. We just stipple this on, let it dry, and that's going to do all the work for us. So this saves a ton of time, gives some really nice effects in the end too. So here we can see the Belcher banner painted in that red metallic effect with the Agrax Earthshade going in to give us some depth. But I wasn't happy with it. It really like washed in with the browns and you just got completely lost. Didn't look like the image. So I took some base Wraithbone paint and then I brought it back down to that prime level. And I ended up doing 2 coats. So 2 nice even coats of this Wraithbone base. And then that completely hid all that work we did earlier and got us right back to the stage we can start putting contrast back on. While that was drying, I took some Nazdreg yellow and I thought I'd just use this to bring out a little bit more vibrancy on these shields at the bottom of the banner and make them a little bit more gold in colour. So I'm not putting this all over it, I'm just picking out bits and just popping it in like little recesses, picking out areas where I think it'll look nice and just roughing it on there, just sketching it on and just dotting it around, and so that'll give us a nice gold effect. Then I go back to the Blood Angels red contrast, and this Wraithbone, both layers are completely dry now, and I'm going with quite a generous coat now this time. So there's all these little dimples and dents and crevices that we want this paint to go into, and I want it to be quite thick to get that nice vibrant colour from the red. So I've been quite generous putting it on there, pushing it around, starting and ending my brush strokes where I want most of the paint to build up, and then I've got plenty of time using this amount of paint, even when the weather's quite warm, to push that paint around and move it to where you want it to go. I'm just taking my time, keeping within the lines here. I don't want to make any mistakes at this stage, so I'm really taking my time and just giving that a nice even coat all over. Then it's time for some Balthazar gold, and we're going to do some dry brushing now. So I've got this cheap brush, super soft bristles, and I'm going to go into this metal paint, load the bristles up, and I'm going to work that paint into the bristles on some kitchen towel, and I'm just going to try and wipe off as much as I can on there so that brush is super dry, and then we can get going doing some dry brushing on the model where we only want a little bit of that colour to come off. And so I'm being really careful at first, just so I know how much paint will come off when I apply it to the model. And I'm just doing downward strokes, just trying to catch the most raised areas of the gold parts of those 2 shields on the totem. Then I take some Stormhost silver, another layer paint, and I do the same effect with the kitchen towel. And then I just go over it really gently now, just to catch the most raised areas of those gold shields. And then I go on to the back armour, which is pretty much going to be mostly silver, and I can be a bit rougher now, really catching those edges, the raised parts, and really giving it a nice highlight. I didn't clean my brush in between these stages either. Once you do the dry brushing like this, you kind of doesn't hold much paint from the previous colour. Then I go back to the silver, do the same thing on the towel, and now I've got a really strong silver highlight, and now I'm going to go over all the weapons, making sure to catch those raised areas, dragging my brush across the texture of the model, let the model do the work for you, and you get really nice quick highlight that I think looks great and doesn't take long at all. Now we're going to do some highlighting on that shield, and I've got some Wild Rider red layer paint, and I'm just going to dry brush this on. So I'm not going to mess around here trying to paint these highlights. I just want a nice quick dry brush over here. So we've got that red coming through, that Blood Angels red as our main colour, and then I'll do a little dry brush of this, and then we'll move on to Troll Slayer orange for our real bright highlight. And so orange as a highlight on red is perfect, so it always works really nice. And so this is going to really bring out those raised areas. I'm just trying to be quite careful here, just catching the most raised areas of the shield. Then I'm going back to the Stormhost silver, and I'm just going to put little dots on the eyes that are within the shield, because I want those to stand out and be very metallic. So I'm taking my time here. I picked a smaller brush. I haven't done a super neat job, but I'm not too worried, because when we put the colour over that, it's almost going to look like those eyes are glowing a little bit. So I think it'll work to my favour. Being a bit more careful here, and then I'm going on to some contrast Yandin yellow, and then once that Stormhost silver is completely dry, I'll put a good helping of that right over those eyes, and that's going to make those yellowy, goldy, metallic eyes really pop out of the model and contrast nicely against that red, and also work with the green of the model too. So I think this is a really nice touch to finish the shield. Then it's some base Leadbelcher, and here I'm just going to go and pick out all those little rivets that are popping up on the shield. You don't really have to do this stage if you don't want to. For tabletop ready, you don't need to. And then I'm going to take some Mournfang brown base paint, a little bit of blue tack, pop that on the end of a thick chunky brush, and then I'm going to fix my model to that blue tack, and that's going to act like a little turntable to make it really easy to paint the rim of the base. And then I'm just going to give 2 coats of this Mournfang brown. Some paints you can get away with just 1 coat. Some of the Vallejos are really good for this, but with this Mournfang, I'm going to use it and do 2 coats and then give us a nice rich brown that works really well with the snakebite leather we chose for the swampy base. I nearly forgot this stage. It's time for some technical blood for the blood god, and this is going to go on that severed head. It's a pretty fresh head, so we want some blood on there. So I'm just putting a little bit coming out the nose, down the mouth, dotting a little bit in the eye sockets as well, and also where that spikes pierce the skull at the top, we want some blood coming out of there, and also a little bit dribbling down from the bottom of the spike too, just to represent that that's quite a fresh head. So we want to give it some blood for the blood god, and then that'll finish that off nicely, and then that's the final stage of the model complete. And there we go, there's our Murknob with Belcher banner painted to a tabletop ready standard with mostly contrast paints, some dry brushing and a few technical paints to give us some nice effects and to save a bit of time. And I'm really happy with how this guy's turned out. I'm really glad I went back on that shield and brought it back to the Wraithbone and then used the red straight over it. I think that's a lot better and matches the artwork a lot closer too. So all up, I'm really pleased with this model, and I'll be using this technique for all the other orcs in the box. And there's the banner. That tongue came out really great. That Volupus pink, just 1 coat of paint is really effective. And I love how that Nurgles Rot has given the swampy effect I was after for the base too. And you can see here that recipe from the painting coach does some great quick Oryx skin, and then using that Typhus Corrosion technical paint on the metallic really gives you some textures as well. So Blood for the Blood God was the final technical paint to really sell the idea that this head was pretty fresh on the spike. If you'd like to see how I made the base for all the Kruleboyz, and I've done a video that shows you exactly how it's done. Again, it's quick, easy, tabletop ready, doesn't take long at all. And I've also done a painting video for the Killer Boss, and I'm working my way through all the models from the Dominion box set. And in the description below, I'll put a list of all the paints I use for this model, and also a link to Element Games where you can pick them up and save yourself up to 20% on the RRP. And for every sale made through a link there, I get a small commission, which helps me develop the channel and do loads more videos like this. So thanks so much for your support. I really appreciate it, and it really helps me get these videos out every single day. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it helped you out and showed you a quick way that you can get your Murknob tabletop ready, but also looking nice and neat and tidy too. I had a great time doing it, and I hope you enjoyed the video as much as I enjoyed painting it. But thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games. If you like this kind of content and would like to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page, and thanks to everyone who's joined so far. It's really awesome. We hang out on Discord, talk about the hobby, share ideas and help each other out, and you'll get some perks there that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'll put a link in the description, and it'll be great to see you there.